Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues and friends, welcome to the seventh COP26 webinar of the ICLE Local Governments for Sustainability, hosted in its capacity as the focal point of local governments and municipal authorities constituency. My name is Yunus Arikan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy, and I'm also the LGMA focal point. Today, we will be taking you through in the next hour our updates from our last webinar, which was a month ago, and we will also go through the expected agenda in the next couple of weeks, as usual. Just before going through the details of the agenda, let me remind that this session is recorded. Every LGMA webinar is repeated mostly twice in the morning for the Eastern Hemisphere and in the afternoon of European time for the Western Hemisphere. And presentation is also uploaded so that you can download later on. For those who are new in our webinars, all participants are muted at the beginning and throughout the webinar. Those who have inputs to the agendas during the presentation, you can type your information or comments or questions into the question box. If you'd like to intervene verbally, you can also type. You can also raise your hand in the participant box. After the end of the webinar, we will open the floor. We will be able to both read the questions, but also we can also open the microphones, turn on the microphones so that those who would like to intervene can also share verbally their inputs. With this in mind, let me take you through the agenda once again. For those who are familiar, we are usually starting with a brief, let's say, recap of our efforts in terms of evolution of the advocacy of the local and regional governments and the UNFCCC, the UN climate change processes, including our priorities of this year. But we spend most of our time in terms of the progress since the last webinar, which was 22nd of July. For this one, we will go through ICLE's Race to Zero dialogues, CC35, second Local Environmental Authorities Forum, the new report from Coalition for Urban Transitions, and the responses to the letter of high-level champions. And then the last part, we will highlight a number of upcoming events. We will start with the Marrakech Partnership, Climate Action Pathways. 3rd of September will be the online platform by Japan UN Climate Secretariat and IGES. 21st of September is the mayoral session of European Sustainable Cities and Towns conference. On the same day, UN 75 will be celebrated in New York at the UN headquarters. On the 30th of September 2020, UN Biodiversity Summit will take place. On the 14th of October and 20th of October, we will have dedicated sessions for Daring Cities 2020. In November, we will have 1 week of mobilization, or 2 weeks of mobilization in local climate solutions for Africa. And we will also have a debate on the progress in the preparations for the Race to Zero November dialogue. So that is what we will address today. Without too much delays, I'd like to recall, as this is the 7th webinar of the year. We are trying to have this every month. Previous sessions have covered a number of guests and themes. We had contributions from COP25 and COP26 presidency. We had a dialogue with the COP25 and COP26 champions, Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Munoz. We had a special session on climate, land, nature dialogues or synergies with the Biodiversity Edinburgh process, and as well as UN Day for Desertification. And we also had some updates on in the past month. For one important information, that all these webinars are uploaded in the ICLE's YouTube channel, dedicated section of LGMA COP26 webinars, and you can also download the presentation as well, that you will receive the links after this webinar. For those who are new in the UN climate process, this is a process of the past 25 years or so. Basically, local and regional governments have been active in the climate space even before the UN Climate Change Convention was adopted by the nations. The first 20 years, more or less, was an effort because neither the UNFCCC nor Kyoto Protocol had any recognition of our role, official documents. Therefore, especially starting from 2007 onwards, we had made an ambitious LGMA roadmap, climate roadmap. We have participated in the technical negotiations for the preparation of the Paris Agreement, which is called ADP negotiations. During this process, we have created also the UNFCCC Friends of Cities with like-minded countries who support the proposals of LGMA constituency, and we have participated in the 2014 UN Climate Summit. All these have evolved and led us to the development of the Paris Agreement, which was remarkable because it has, for the first time, a preambular paragraph which recognizes the importance of engagement of all levels of government. The document that is signed by the national heads of states has this paragraph. That is a powerful paragraph. There are several elements in the other parts of the document as well. The decision also has specific references to non-party stakeholders, including cities and other subnational governments. So therefore, the implementation of Paris Agreement has a strong vision to engage local and regional governments. It's not anymore a voluntary work of local and regional governments, but it is part of their responsibility as a global actor. Since then, with the Paris Agreement, we have been advancing our advocacy through a constituency, but we also have been participating in the Marrakech partnership of the convention. Talanoa dialogues was an important moment. We had it in numerous cities and regions around the world. We have elevated Friends of Cities to Friends of Multi-Level Action. We participated in the Global Climate Action, and 2019 UN Climate Action Summit is also an important moment for us. So this is the snapshot over the past 25 years, and we also know that every year parties are conducting this process through the presidencies decided by on a rotation basis among the regional governments, regional groups. The last year, 2019, was held by the presidency of the COP25, Chilean presidency. They were presumably having this presidency towards the end of the year in 2020, so handover to the UK government, but because of the corona measures, this is now extended, so continuing with the Chilean presidency until 2020, 2021 November. And we will be having an interim meeting, which was presumably in June 2020 in Bonn, but it will be held possibly in 2021 in October, in June in Bonn as well, but this is still subject to final confirmation. Every year parties define their presidents, usually ministers of environment or sometimes ministers of foreign affairs. In the case of Chile, this is Minister of Environment, Ms. Carolina Schmidt. In the case of UK, it is the Secretary of State of BASE. Since Paris Agreement, there is also high-level champions pushing for ambitious climate action agenda. Gonzalo Munoz and Nigel Topping are having this responsibility. This year, COP26 president also assigned Mark Carney as the finance advisor. And just recently in the June, there was also appointment of a group of experts and leaders, which included C40 chair, Mayor of Los Angeles, as a part of the Friends of COP to help the UK presidency. Every year, there are several regular engagement opportunities. We are participating through our summit side events, or we are providing our data through the reporting platforms. We participate in consultations through workshops and thematic discussions, but also we provide input by interventions, documents, and interaction with our Friends of Multi-Level Action. Every presidency also have their own priorities depending on the political agenda. This year, UK government also announced the 5 themes, and since COP25 in Madrid, the multi-level climate action COP, which is the vision towards COP26, is the motto of LGMA roadmap towards COP26, focusing on 6 main elements. These are raising ambition, NDC vertical integration, localizing climate finance, balanced approach in the mitigation and adaptation, linking climate to circular economy and nature, and amplifying the global climate action, including convening the first urbanization ministerial at COP26, getting closer to cultural heritage community, getting more engagement in the other stakeholder engagement process of the UNFCCC, including action for climate empowerment, as well as expanding the MPGCA to a new phase, which will be a topic in the next couple of minutes. For this year, we have established a working group, which is now joined by around 20 organizations and partners who would be willing to cover each of those thematic areas. This is an overview of our work towards this year and towards next year. What happened in between since 22nd of July is, in fact, usually summer periods are, summer for the northern hemisphere is relatively a low profile because of the summer vacations. However, as you have all noticed, now that most of the events at the global level arena are postponed for next year, many activities are at the national level, and many of the global efforts are now turning into virtual platforms. Therefore, a number of things have evolved over the past couple of weeks. One of the most important ones was the one held by ICLE in its response to the Race to Zero campaign launched by the champions Gonzalo Munoz and Nigel Topping on the 5th of June. ICLE was mobilizing a number of cities to commit to climate neutrality and Race to Zero. So on the 29th of July, we convened a dialogue about the climate leadership of cities and regions in Europe, Japan, Korea, and Australia. Our goal was to have this multi-level and collaborative dialogue. Therefore, we wanted to have inputs from ministers, national governments, the UN experts, but in particular, leaders of our cities and regions from these countries, and knowing that they have a lot of inputs, or they have a lot of things to share. We were very happy to have a nice lineup. We had a video message from Minister of Environment of Japan, Mr. Koizumi. We had engagement and acknowledgement from Nigel Topping and Ovais Sarmat from UNFCCC, and the mayors of Bonn, Turku, Suwon, Hobart, as well as Governor of Nagano, and in the last minute inclusion, Mayor of Saitama City from Japan, were the political leaders who shared their vision. In the second half of this dialogue, we have invited experts of the city administrations in sharing their experiences in how they support their leaders in terms of turning their political commitments and vision into practical implementation in terms of climate commitments, planning, climate action, accounting and reporting, and sharing stakeholder engagement, and across levels of government inside their administration. So that was the scope of this exercise, and we're happy that there was different models of engagement. For example, Mayor of Suwon and Minister of Environment have provided video messages. Other leaders have provided their in-person into this dialogue, and they have also shared their speeches. And from this links, you can access to all the documents and the presentations, which will be made available to you as well. And the whole session is on the YouTube so that you can watch it. But in a nutshell, the highlights we can underline as such. Minister of Environment of Japan made an ambitious statement of a 5-minute video. He highlighted the shared latest updates from the Japanese government in terms of it is a vision for international funding through Japanese overseas funding, especially limiting the funding to the coal power plants. But most of the message was particularly referencing to the evolution of net zero cities and prefectures in Japan. He particularly underlined that thanks to this mobilization, which is now exceeding more than 100 cities and regions and cities and prefectures, which is representing more than 50% of Japanese population, Japan as a whole could be much more positive in terms of adopting a more ambitious climate goal. This is very important because Japan has announced a second NDC, had submitted a second NDC at the beginning of this year in February. We were all aware this mobilization of Japanese cities and prefectures, and that was one of the reasons why we were particularly disappointed that the commitment was not more ambitious than before. But officials from Ministry of Environment of Japan have already signaled that this will not be the last time Japan will make a submission. And during the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, Minister of Environment of Japan has already announced that Japan is committed to present the third NDC. So this video statement and this Race to Zero dialogue was a proof that on the next couple of weeks and months, we may expect an additional submission from Japan, which will hopefully take into account these commitments from Japanese cities and prefectures. As we said, more than 50% of the Japanese population, and many megacities like Tokyo, Yokohama, Kyoto, but as well as prefectures like Nagano or other prefectures of Japan are part of this process. And during the session, with the participation of Minister of Environment, but also the Governor of Nagano and Mayor of Saitama, Japan as a whole demonstrated a very unique model of multi-level and collaborative climate action, which was, of course, inspirational for many of the other countries. Similarly, for example, the Republic of Korea was also very shining over the last couple of weeks. On the 5th of June, 200 Korean cities and regional governments have announced their commitment to adopt a climate emergency declaration. And 1 month later, and this was officially announced in this webinar by the mayor of Suwon, that a coalition for net zero is created in Korea, led by the mayor of Suwon, but also the National Association of Mayors, which is now gathering more than 75 local and regional governments in Korea. That is a good example of how climate emergency declarations can elevate the commitments for climate neutrality. Whereas the mayor of Hobart has underlined the progress in Australia. In fact, Australian cities were championing the climate emergency declarations at the councils. And in fact, this now spread throughout the world. More than 1,200 councils or governments have adopted such declarations. Obviously, Australian national government is not that much ambitious in terms of the climate emergency or climate neutrality, but this commitment from local and subnational leaders in Australia is giving us the commitment that Australian stakeholders will still be demonstrating a pioneering leadership in the climate debate, even in the case of COVID-19. So that was a good example. Turku, who had been a champion of climate ambition for a long time, and it was one of the first cities in COP25. The mayor of Turku was in the high-level session announcing the Climate Ambition Alliance. In this webinar, it became clear Turku is one of those first cities who have met the compliance criteria of the minimum requirements of Race to Zero, of the Race to Zero campaign, which is pledging, planning, proceeding, and publishing the information. So the experience of Mayor of Turku was unique in that sense. And later on, the experts from her administration also demonstrated how commitment can really lead concrete action over these years, because it gives confidence to the stakeholders, and working consistently had paved a lot of way in the sense that connecting climate action to circular economy, to nature-based solutions, is one of those unique elements that Turku is introducing. Mayor of Bonn, also as ICLEI's president, had also summarized how the city is also evolved from a voluntary action by responding to climate emergency calls of Fridays for Future or Parents for Future, and later on with the work of the city administration and the climate council of the city. Now the city has announced climate neutrality for 2035, which is 3 years before the German phase out of coal. In fact, that was also a good example of how the city from Germany could support the national commitments, but as well as the European process as well. And all these discussions were, in fact, warmly welcomed by the UNFCCC Deputy Executive Secretary and high-level champion. In fact, they were simply impressed with this diversity and the scope of commitments, connecting climate action to climate justice, to nature-based solutions, circularity, this gave them, the leaders of the UN, the confidence that if these kind of experience can be spread throughout the national governments across the world, this could really help us to accelerate NDCs. Therefore, there's a need for connecting to the NDCs. While we were having this debate on the end of July with the, let's say, Eastern Hemisphere, yesterday we had witnessed a very impressive event from the leadership of the Latin American, South American, and Central American cities under CC35, one of the newest networks that is connecting American capital cities. This was the second Local Environmental Authorities Forum, supported by a broad community of partners. As of today, CC35 is capturing around really around 40 capital cities and their partners across Americas. They have started this work in 2018 with the Quito declaration, and yesterday they have made significant progress, and they have also adopted their Santiago declaration. The initiative is fully in line with the vision laid out by the COP26 LGMA roadmap, which was announced in Madrid. And in fact, the process led by CC35 and other regional partners, like supported by R20, ICLE, but also FLACMA and C40 and GCOM, is more or less like the regional version of the LGMA global roadmap. This was also very unique because, as you have remembered, we couldn't join Santiago for the COP, which was the host officially, but instead it was moved to Madrid. But having this second local environmental forum in Santiago, or with the engagement of Santiago, it was a virtual event, but it was already connecting Mayor of Santiago, Mayor of Glasgow. That was a moment where, in fact, we were refreshing our commitment from COP25, and in that sense, COP25 president was very supportive of this effort as well. So in that regard, you can definitely recall that the ambitious climate action is not anymore restricted to only global north, but as you have seen, both in the case of ICLE's Race to Zero dialogue, but CC35, we are now talking about a global mobilization of local and regional governments, which is giving us the confidence that on the next couple of weeks and months ahead, we will be able to present more ambitious outcomes. Meanwhile, a number of reports are being produced. In the past LGMA webinars, we have referred to the NDC guide from UN Habitat as a result of the Urban Nets project of ICLE and UN Habitat. We also referred to the GIZ paper on collaborative action. And this couple of weeks, we have seen a new report by Coalition for Urban Transitions on the economic aspects of greening the global recovery through cities. This is the first version of this report, and a new version is coming in September. This was basically connecting the stimulus packages, whether how green they are and how much they could be greener if they were involved in the cities. Obviously, the stimulus packages, the first assessment is that it is not that much promising, in the sense that they are not literally driving to the areas of investments that we're looking for. Therefore, this report is a good element for us to evidence that we have to continue our advocacy at the national levels. The report prioritized 7 areas that national governments could consider to channel their their stimulus packages for COVID-19 recovery processes, like retrofits, mobility, renewable energy, active transport, which is non-motorized transport, nature-based solutions, waste, and research and development. And the report makes an assessment of these investments in terms of their incremental investments, carbon reduction potential, job creation potentials, ease of implementation in terms of facilitation of legal and technical barriers, and wider benefit, in particular public health, air quality. That these are the let's say benefits of such investments. We look forward to further development of this report, and we will look forward to using this as a strong document for our advocacy efforts. Over the past weeks, there was also an intense mobilization. Early in the March, champions Gonzalo Munoz and Nigel Topping invited both the UNFCCC parties and the partners to share their ideas about how the new phase of Marrakech partnership could be designed. This was based on the results that in Madrid, parties decided that Marrakech partnership should be expanded towards 2025. The original mandate in the Paris Agreement was that it was only limited for raising pre-2020 ambition. So the decision of Madrid COP25 was powerful, and this lecture from champions was the first attempt, in particular, while we are focusing on the priorities of this year, we should start to talk of more visionary and more medium term. So we are very happy to see a strong response from number of partners and parties. We can group those responses so far in three main categories. We have submissions from LGMA members. This is ICLE Regions 4 and UITP. We have other partners from non-party stakeholders like SLOCAT, WWF, CDP, Global Alliance, who are already part of our roadmap as well towards COP26. There are other initiatives or coalitions like the thematic groups of land use and transport and the Marrakech Partnership. And there are different stakeholders, for example, Climate Action Network, trade unions, farmers, World Business Council, Galvanizing Global Climate Action, and the Climate Group, which was representing different stakeholders. So they also have made submissions. But more importantly, we have seen a growing number of parties making positive responses to this call from the high-level champions, which is encouraging us to be more hopeful that if well designed, the new phase of Marrakech Partnership could really be well received by partners, by parties, that they can incorporate this into their NDCs in the coming months. We have always been referring to the positive submissions from EU or Switzerland, but we have now strong statements from Arab states, African group, which were particularly also calling for example, announcing regional and national ambassadors, which was also addressed in the submissions from ICLE and others as well. Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, they were also referring to more active engagement. Chile had already been mentioning this in their NDC. So this diversity of party submissions is also a very good signal that we're on the right track, that the new phase of the second phase of NDCs, which is starting from 2020 onwards, will be the real Paris Agreement implementation phase. We all are aware that the current NDCs are not that much relevant to the Paris Agreement because they were all prepared before Paris Agreement was adopted. So we are very hopeful that by the end of 2021, with the new NDCs, we will be much more confident that we are making this transition to a new era of Paris Agreement. With this, let's now have a forward-looking vision. Over the next couple of weeks, the climate action pathways of Marrakech Partnership will be advanced. There are 9 thematic groups. One of them is human settlements. Based on the past couple of weeks and months, we have managed to convince and to agree with the champions that in this new next couple of years, 2021 and 2020, the human settlements will be focusing on built environment and another separate group on waste and consumption. Built environment, in particularly the buildings, but also the infrastructure, the constructions of facilities, let's say networks of roads, railways, or technical IT infrastructure, whereas waste and consumption will focus on solid waste management, management of the waste, collection of waste, but in particular minimizing the generation of waste through sustainable consumption production, through addressing of consumption-based emissions, or addressing equity discussions, so that it is much more holistic rather than end-of-pipe solutions. This is really giving us the confidence that both developed and developing countries could find themselves. In particular, waste could be an important point for developing countries, and sustainable consumption production could be also an important agenda for the cities and the regions in the north. So over the next few weeks, ICLE and UNEP, who are leading the leadership of these 2 subgroups, will be inviting other partners to invite them to contribute to this discussions about future actions, defining the new initiatives or implementation of their existing commitments or existing efforts, in particular in synergy with different levers like governments at all levels, but finance community, technology, business, and civil society, also with a much more interim targets like 2040, 2030, and 2025. So any LGMA members who are interested in built environment and waste and consumption, feel free to approach ICLE and UN Environment Program so that we can bring your expertise. We will also be approaching to new stakeholders who have not been involved in the process because of this waste and consumption as a new group. This, in fact, builds to the high-level dialogue we had in COP25, but we're aware that there will be numerous new partners joining us. The role of those groups, the thematic pathway groups would be that by the end of this month they will present a more or less putting flesh on the bones of this idea of these two subgroups and three main impact areas each. Champions will be working with their support teams who are institutions or experts or consultants who are supporting such evidence-based work through their knowledge and technical capacities, so that they will provide some ideas, some inputs, some feedbacks, so that this will be an iterative process. This year there will be also a new element of introducing a scientific, let's say, review. This all proves that the work of climate action pathways is really evolving in time with the engagement of numerous partners and other processes. So that the aim is that by the end of October or by mid-October, this pathway documents are ready. It will be presented and widely shared in November onwards. This is perfect timing because starting from November, we are hoping that national governments on the way to COP26 could start to formulate their new NDCs so that the climate action pathways could find their ways, could find their roots into the national processes, so that starting from November onwards, we could advocate more actively at the national level. In the next couple of weeks and months, there will be interesting new initiatives. One of the most important ones is coming from Japan. The Minister of Environment of Japan had been signaling this over the past couple of months. On the 3rd of September, there will be an online ministerial meeting, which will be seeing the launch of the new online platform for redesign of 2020 efforts on especially climate and COVID-19 practices recoveries. The good news is that this online ministerial meeting will also have a separate element of non-party stakeholder engagement. In this regard, Minister of Environment of Japan is inviting all non-party stakeholders, constituencies, to provide their inputs through a text or a video message. All interested partners are invited to send their texts. We don't have to make one submission per constituency. We are expecting, as long as within the framework of this, let's say, vision, all inputs from non-party stakeholders will be finding their home into this process. And even good news is that even because of the lack of preparations, if the deadline of 27th of August is missed, which will be the deadline for being visible on the 3rd of September, Minister of Environment of Japan will continue to receive inputs from non-party stakeholders so that until the end of 2020, this online platform could receive inputs from different stakeholders. So we encourage all our networks, partners to consider providing inputs by the deadlines as mentioned before. In September, one of the unique elements would be the European Conference on Sustainable Cities and Towns, which was planned for October in Mannheim, but now is turning into virtual. But they will have their mayors meeting in September 21st. And this is particular because this event is one of those events recognized by the German EU presidency. So the debate and the impact, the inputs of the European mayors will constitute the body of the Mannheim message, which will then be communicated or presented to European Commission on the 1st of October at the European Sustainable Cities and Towns. So we encourage European cities, European partners to connect to the coordinators or organizers of Mannheim conference, European Sustainable Cities and Towns conference, so that they can be part of these efforts. In the same, or more or less around the same days, there will be a pretty busy days through the UN General Assembly, which was a physical space, but due to Corona measures, this will be virtual. There will be a special celebration of UN 75th anniversary on the 21st September. but there will be a special event on 13th of September, which is the United Nations Summit on Biodiversity, so that it will be presenting an impulse or giving a new momentum for efforts for a new deal for biodiversity and nature to be designed along the UN conference on biodiversity, which is announced as COP15 in Kunming, China in May. So the summit in this virtual summit along the UN high-level week will be a good opportunity so that biodiversity could receive as a strong engagement from heads of state as the climate agenda has been receiving through the Paris Agreement, so that we are hopeful that there will be good references. ICLE has been coordinating the work of local and subnational governments along with Committee of the Regions and Regions for and calls a number of other partners. So we are hoping that local and regional leaders will also be engaging in this agenda, but more details will be followed soon on the way in the next couple of weeks. In October, ICLE Bonn will be hosting a 3-week Daring Cities Summit. This will be a virtual event. You can see that we will have plenary sessions on every Wednesday, and on 14th of October will be specific reserved agenda for climate neutrality of cities and regions, and these will be the moment where we will have additional information, commitments, but as well as the first compliance with the Race to Zero campaign. So we are encouraging our partners to join us into these discussions. In addition to these plenaries, there will be numerous deep dive sessions. So numerous partners have been working on their sessions. And as part of this effort, on the 20th of October, we will organize a special LGMA session. We will go through our Glasgow roadmap, but we will also make this moment as an opportunity for the cities and regions to be communicating or be receiving the outcomes of the climate action pathway. So we will invite a number of the pathway partners so that there can be a presentation of their documents to the cities and regions globally. And we also would like to make a special unique session for South and Central American cities, hopefully with translation in Spanish and Portuguese as well, so that during the COP25 president of Chilean government, we could have a more dedicated discussion of American partners, American stakeholders, American cities and regions with the climate action pathways partners. Meanwhile, we also would like to announce that City of Bonn and ICLE will be very happy to receive proposals from different partners to host side events during the scope of Daring Cities. This means that the interested partners would be developing or using their own virtual platforms, but they could all be promoted as part of the overall communication of Daring Cities. So more information will be circulated from today onwards, and applications could be sent to ICLE by the 28th of August in terms of what type of events they can host. In November, we will be also witnessing the 2020 version of Local Climate Solutions for Africa. This is the virtual congress that ICLE Africa has been hosting over the past couple of years or almost a decade. This will be hosted with the endorsement or auspices of the city of Kigali. This is particularly important because the climate conference will be presided by an African government in the year 2022 onwards. So by kicking off the Locks for Africa in November, ICLE and African cities and regions are hoping that the preparations for African presidency could be started well advanced, so that the outcomes from Glasgow could be well fed into the African presidency. In that sense, Locks for Africa will be playing a key role. And finally, as you may remember, Race to Zero campaign and Race to Zero process had introduced a new concept of having a November dialogues. More than 100 applications were submitted by numerous partners. The champions have now announced that between 9th of November and 19th of November will be the moment where numerous sessions will be held. One of those days is dedicated for cities, regions, and built environment. There will be special sessions led by the networks of local and regional governments. One session will be focusing on cities, the other one will be focusing on regions, the other one will be for multi-level and multi-stakeholder platforms or initiatives. The management of this or the mapping of these events is led by the champions engagement teams, and they have invited the applicant networks or partners to merge their applications so that around 16 applications for the cities and regions track could be now merged into this three events. The first session will be coordinated by Science-Based Targets Initiative. The second will be by Under 2 Coalition, and the third will be by the GCOM. So these networks, together with other applicants, will now be working in the next couple of days so that those the initial ideas could be now synthesized into a more inclusive and much more, let's say, synergetic way, so that these three sessions could give us the opportunity to present our inputs to the Race to Zero commitments and dialogues. So more updates will come from the champions and the coordinator of the sessions in the next couple of days. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. I thank you all for your patience. Obviously, it's not easy to focus for around the 45 minutes of a presentation, but we hope we were able to cover the updates and the upcoming sessions. So with this, I would like to conclude my session, but I would invite any of you to turn on your microphones or type your questions into the chat box so that we can address your questions as such. Any volunteers, feel free to raise your hand as well if you want. That is also an opportunity to interact, another mechanism as such. At the moment, I see a hand from Kobe Brandt from ICLEI Africa and Cities Biodiversity Center. Kobe, the floor is yours. Please turn on your mic so that we can hear you all, or all participants can hear you directly.
Thank you very much, Yunus, and thank you for this very rich presentation that you gave us all. I just want to say, it's not all doom and gloom that there isn't a COP this year, because if you look at the momentum that is building up, especially within our broader subnational local constituency, and the parties coming to the fore, really driving the agenda, really focusing on action and commitments in a stronger way than there's such momentum here that one can almost feel it in the air and sense it, that people in lieu of a COP are really taking action. And isn't that what the world needs? So maybe there is a bit of a blessing in disguise here in the fact that we're going to have the COP only next year, at the end of next year. So I think there'll be great progress from when we last met in Madrid. And just to also say that from our perspective, it's amazing to see how the convergence and the actual similarities between the momentum that we see here in the climate space is also building up in the nature and biodiversity space, and that we can really look at a more focused thematic way of addressing these two cumulative challenges together, and that the one progress on the one hand really helps the one on the other hand as well. So from the biodiversity advocacy perspective as well, there are milestones reached by the same community that is gathering here today through the Global Task Force as well. And the Edinburgh Declaration is a culmination of a process led by Scotland, which is really calling on parties to take decisive action and include cities and regions in the new global biodiversity framework. So those two COPs are both happening next year due to COVID-19, but also driven with more rigor and commitment because of COVID-19. So what a fantastic presentation you had here. It really inspires me, and I hope hopefully everybody else who is listening in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. I'm very happy to hear this contribution from you. Indeed, I think we were in the same line that every crisis brings its own opportunities if we are able to seize these opportunities. I'm just, while talking to you or while listening to you, I was trying to find the link to the previous webinars of LGMA, where in fact on the 17th of June we had a special presentation of Edinburgh Declaration from our colleagues from Scotland, as well as the Cities by the Centre. So I'm very happy to hear your updates that Edinburgh Declaration is now about to be announced soon. And I also believe it's perfectly timely, because I think, well, let's hope that this could feed into the UN Biodiversity Summit on the 30th of September, which could be a nice, let's say, overlap. And I fully agree that the synergy between different processes is all helping us to achieve more ambitious outcomes, so that with the lessons learned on COVID-19 pandemic response, which is a collective and global effort, we can also handle other crises on climate, biodiversity, air quality, and others. So I fully support your work or your vision on that. And I'm sure from the Edinburgh Declaration, we are lucky to go to Scotland once again because of the COP26 in Glasgow, so that we can continue to have this leadership from our subnational and local governments across the world, and we can feed each other on that line. I think in the next couple of days you will be sharing more of the documentation and our advocacy of the biodiversity community is also having their regular monthly webinar, so that those who are interested, you can also participate in these sessions to have more information on their work. That was very nice input from your side, Gino, Kobe. Any other additional comments, remarks, contributions, clarifications? Feel free to raise your hand or type into the question box, so that we can share with our colleagues. Once this session is over, you will receive the link to the recording of this seminar, webinar, but also you will be able to find the webinar recording of the morning session, which was also very intense in terms of question and answers and feedbacks from the partners. So we can also benefit from the dialogue in the morning session as well. If there are no other inputs, I'm happy to save the next 12 minutes from all your agenda, so that you can focus on your other business, knowing that we will be continuing to stay in touch in terms of our exchange of emails through LGMA mailings, through LGMA working groups, and feel free to share any inputs you would like to share with us in the meantime. And you can also find more updates in the citiesandregions.org of the LGMA roadmap towards COP26. Yeah, with this, we reached to the end of our session today. Just again, I know the Local Environmental Authorities Forum link to yesterday's webinar will be also soon uploaded, so we can also share this with you. With that, thank you all, and have a nice day, have a nice afternoon, or have a nice evening to all of you, and very nice to see you all, and thanks for your contributions and interest. Bye-bye.